Welcome, everybody. As I emailed earlier in preparation for this meeting, we asked that you all do some homework so everyone could be on the same page. Asked that you watch the short YouTube video of navigating the web interface. Look through the Geospatial Database Users Guide so you can get acquainted with that. Subscribe to the database discussion board, and then submit your GeoDatabase 101 questions to the Microsoft form. And so far, we do have one question to that form, but we'll be monitoring that form. So as you have questions, especially during this, this roundtable series, please continue to submit those questions to the forms. We will follow up personally, or we'll integrate your questions into the roundtable discussions, or we might ask you to even post your question to the discussion board so everybody can see it as well. Not a lot to introduce. I think that you're all aware that we created this Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group database as a central repository for tracking habitat and conservation measures on energy and transportation lands. We're hoping that it can help facilitate some of that some of those conservation activities between energy and transportation organizations and conservation groups and other partnership opportunities. And we're also hoping that you all can use what you've been tracking on this database to communicate some of the activities that you've been doing and that conservation value to internal and external stakeholders and to the public. And then we're hoping that, we're planning for this to also help inform future listing decisions. Is there habitat across the US on energy and transportation lands? And what does that mean for at-risk species? Through your homework, you should have been able to navigate to the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group webpage. And I'm also going to take us to that webpage as well, just in case some of you did not get a chance to go through your whole homework. So this is the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group website, the homepage. In order to get to the Geospatial Database page, go to Tracking and Monitoring up at the top right, and then click Geospatial Database on that drop-down menu. There, we've got this nice counter of how many participating organizations we have that are using the database, monarch supported, and then total reported acres. And you can scroll through it for a quick tutorial on how to get started using the geospatial database, fill out the intake questionnaire, and then even look at the public map for the database. You can also go to this yellow bar of drop-down menus and get started this way. So we've got that same intake questionnaire. If you are not using the database yet, this is how you would get started through the intake questionnaire. Look at the database user levels, which we'll also talk about during this presentation. As your additional user request forms, and then your terms of use and data sharing agreement for those interested. We also have a tutorials and resources page, which I would highly recommend everybody to go to. So we've got a webinar here, and we'll post future webinars onto this page. We also have our tutorials, some really short video tutorials that just try and make the entire use of the database as easy as possible. So I did point you all to the Navigating the Web Interface tutorial, which is a quick 7-minute video, and it goes through some of these same resources as well. And then you can also find tutorials on using the CCAA reporting tool, downloading and using Survey 123, and then importing and exporting data on ArcGIS. And this is also where you would find the Geospatial Database Users Guide. guide to using survey 123, sites versus management areas, and data sharing levels. And so this is what some of those resources look like to get acquainted with them, and they can be really helpful as well. Okay. While I have this up, any questions just about the website? Oh, we also directed you to the discussion board. So you would need to log into the discussion or log into the working group database and then go to the discussion boards. And there's one specifically for the Geo database where you can post your questions and then read other people's questions and responses as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go back here. So once you get started, once you take that user intake questionnaire, there are levels there are user types that that each organization has access to. There is going to be one account administrator for each organization. So if an energy company creates an account on the database, there's going to be one person responsible for that energy company, and they are the account administrator. They're the primary contact. So if we have a question and need to reach out to somebody, that's who we are going to email first. And they can set up and modify collaborations with other organizations. And they can also authorize new users for fieldwork and data management groups. You also have data managers, and you can have multiple data managers, and they have full access to all data and geospatial tools. They can import and export data, and they can invite users to the fieldwork group. There's one field worker associated with each organization, and we anticipate that people will be sharing the field worker login, and that's how they will be uploading or collecting the habitat data and boundary data. And they do have limited access, so they won't be able to access that data later on unless you also make them a data manager. And you can have the account administrator as the data manager and a field worker because they're just logging in as a field worker. And you can have, the data manager using the field worker account as well. We also can create an account for you. So we know that some organizations already have an ArcGIS Pro account. So we can connect that to the energy or transportation organization that's associated or that's got the Geospatial Database account already. Or we can give you an ArcGIS Pro license through the university. And so it is easier if you already have a Pro license and you tell us that beforehand when you are first getting set up, and then we can connect the two. But if you don't have a Pro account, it's no problem. We extend our Pro account to you. And pause, any questions, feel free to unmute or chat in as well. Does that make sense?
Just to further clarify, the ArcGIS Online account includes the ArcGIS Pro licensing. So in case there's any confusion about that.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
We also know that this is new and there's a lot to get used to. And so we have a demo group, which as soon as we get you integrated into the online account, you have access to this demo group, and you can create false data. You can play around with the data. You can download survey 123 for the demo group and do fake pollinator scorecard points in it just to get a feeling for it. So that way, if you're worried about doing anything in your own organizations, you can do it all here in this demo group. And then you can do the real thing in your own organization as well. Okay. With that, I am going to turn it over to Iris to discuss some of the common terms that we see.
Okay, thanks, Caroline, and hello, everyone. So I think it's helpful as you're getting started in the database to understand some of the common terms that you'll see thrown around here and also in the user's guide. And wanted to start with 3 of the feature types that we commonly reference when we're talking about the database: management areas, sites, and pollinator scorecard points. And these 3 are essentially all the features that you can input into the database to describe where and how you're managing habitat in or on your system. So some of the differences between these, both management areas and sites are polygons. So if you have your records as, for instance, lines, either roads or utility corridor lines, then in order to import these into the database, they would need to be converted to polygons. And if you have trouble with that or are interested in learning more how to do that, we're also working on some tools to help with that conversion. But if you already have your data in polygons, again, describing where you're managing habitat, then you can again look to management areas or sites to determine which of these 2 types of features are most appropriate. So typically for management areas, these are large or multiple land areas that are managed programmatically through similar practices. So a common example of this would be conservation mowing, for instance, along a highway system, where maybe an entire interstate or set of highways would be defined as management areas that are undergoing a conservation mowing practice or a targeted herbicide treatment practice that would qualify as a conservation measure. By comparison, a polygon that you define as a site would typically be more concentrated or discrete locations where you are doing specific or unique practices. So maybe you have a particular restoration activity that happened at a particular location post-construction, or you're doing a special seed mix application in particular locations. Those types of discrete activities, or maybe more unique or special activities, would typically be defined as those discrete sites. And then across either management areas or sites, you can then have pollinator scorecard points. So these are point locations where you are performing habitat assessments. So using the pollinator scorecard, for instance, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or if you have another mechanism for collecting the data that's part of the pollinator scorecard, that information can be imported into the database as, again, a pollinator scorecard point. So those are your habitat quality assessment locations. If you go to the next slide, we have a bit of a diagram here, and this diagram is taken from one of the guidance documents that Caroline mentioned. Specifically, we have a guidance document on sites versus management areas. Which do you want to choose? So if you have any more questions about defining sites or management areas, this is a great resource to go to. What you can see here from the map is we have in the pink and the blue, a little bit hard to distinguish here, but there is a slight distinction. Thank you, Caroline. These kind of long corridor stretches that in this particular example have been defined as management areas. So again, these are areas that are receiving a similar type of management practice like conservation mowing, and again, being applied kind of consistently or programmatically across these large management areas. By contrast, you can see we have some hatched areas in, looks like a gold and green color. Those are, in this example, the areas that were identified as sites. So there's specific activities that are being defined on these locations that are sites. Again, they can still be a corridor. You could have a segment of a corridor that has a particular activity that's taking place. You could even have a site that's within a management area. So that's something that is shown in the kind of upper right corner there as well. And then you see across both the management areas and the sites, we have these stars. And these are, again, the pollinator scorecard points. So where the habitat assessments are occurring, and you can see they're all either within a management area or a site. So ideally, to maximize the full utility of the database, you would have all of your pollinator scorecard points associated with a management area or a site. Some users at this point only have their pollinator scorecard points in the database. They don't have associated management areas or sites. That's also fine. That still is a way to track all of that data associated with your pollinator scorecards. You can run reports and so forth, and we'll get into that in future roundtables. But again, just wanted to share an example of how the scorecard points can integrate with the management areas and the site. And then if you move to the next slide, we also have a concept that we call programs. And programs are really intended to help your analysis or assessment of your pollinator scorecard points or your other activities across a series of management areas or sites. And so again, a program is how you can define a group of management areas or a group of sites, or even just a single management area or a single site could be its own program, where you're defining, again, specific monitoring activities that might be looking at that particular site or management area. For instance, to see what are the impacts of a prescribed burn activity that we did, or what are the results of conducting conservation mowing over the course of 3 or 4 years. If you wanted to just have a subset of your scorecard points that you wanted to look at a subset of your management areas or sites, you would define a program to, again, associate those areas or sites together. In addition, programs specific for management areas is how you can identify those programmatic conservation measures that you're applying across the management areas. So if you are implementing conservation mowing or a targeted herbicide programmatic program, you would define it as part of your program for those management areas. That's different than for sites. Sites, you define your specific conservation measures as you're defining your site. So again, those are unique activities that are happening at unique locations. You would define those conservation measures as part of your site. So that's a little bit of a difference in terms of how the programs are used for management areas versus for sites. So that was a really quick overview of sites and management areas. Happy to answer additional questions during the roundtable portion of today's webinar, but also wanted to briefly mention something related to our account setup. We do have 2 levels for user organizations, a basic or free account and a premium account, which has a $2,500 per year subscription fee, so to speak, associated with it. There's a lot that you can do with just the basic free account. You can upload your data, you have access to Pro, you can edit that data, you can choose to internally or externally share that data. With the premium account, you have additional access to a private dashboard and additional tools you can use there. As I said, additional data management tools. And you also have access to the CCAA compliance reporting tool, which allows you to export particularly your monitoring data in the format it's needed for the CCAA reports. And in case there's any questions, particularly around that annual fee that I just mentioned, if your organization is enrolled in the Monarch CCAA, then the annual fee is waived. So all CCAA partners automatically have that premium account access. Caroline, is there anything you'd like to add further about that?
I don't think so. I think that covers that. Okay,
thanks.
Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you now to discuss the differences between Survey 123, ArcGIS Pro, and ArcGIS Online.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks for everybody for attending today. And actually, just to follow up on the last thing you were just saying, Iris, one other thing is, like, for folks who want to try it out, you can go and look at that demo group, and there you'll be able to see the private dashboard as well as the data management tool. And then for the reporting tool, you can kind of see it, but you can't run it from your account. So anyway, you can kind of get a sense of it from those things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Next slide. Yeah. So yeah, with this slide, we just wanted to kind of talk about the 3 different ways that folks can interact with the database. And for each of these different columns, you'll kind of, for the most part, it's different people who are wearing different hats in your organization, right? So for survey 1, 2, 3, these are the folks who are collecting the pollinator scorecard data. So this is going to be on a mobile device typically. So a tablet or your cell phone will both work, and this works with Android as well as iOS devices. And again, this is just for running your survey 1, 2, 3, where you're collecting your data in the field. The second column here, we're talking about ArcGIS Pro. So if you have people who do GIS in your organization, or if you have a contractor that does your GIS work for you, basically whoever is managing your polygons, your spatial data, your center lines, those are the folks that you're going to want to have accessing ArcGIS Pro. And this is ArcGIS Pro. I would say this is the industry standard for GIS folks these days. Esri's sort of older software, ArcMap, is what this has replaced in the last few years. But this is, again, where you're going to be able to go and edit data and work with all those custom import tools that we have available. And we're going to, on the next slide, don't go there yet, but on the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the specifics between some of these. And then the last column here, ArcGIS Online. So that's where your management folks are going to want to be able to tune in and see what data is currently in the database for your organization, as well as for other organizations. So obviously, you're probably pretty familiar already with the public dashboard. That's through your, obviously, web-based interface. So that's the public interface, but then there is a private one that looks somewhat similar, but has specific information for your organization and some additional information about where there's errors in your data set, and an additional tool to correct some of those errors. So let's go to the next slide. And here this is not meant to be comprehensive at all, but and there definitely is some overlap between those 3 that we were just talking about in terms of what you can do with them. But this is to give you an idea of some of the functionality that you get here. So again, that survey 1, 2, 3 is really for in-field use. So your field teams will be using that. It's on your mobile devices. So in the 3rd line there, we say that, or 3rd row, that it syncs directly to the database. So when you're in the field, after you captured some field information, you can hit the sort of check button, the check mark button, and then it'll go directly into the database. Or if you want to work offline, you can totally do that as well, as long as you have, when you're in the office, if you download the application first and you download that survey, then you can go into the field, you can be away from cell towers and still be able to collect the data, collect a whole bunch of records, and then come back and sync it later. And it calculates your pollinator scorecard immediately in the field. So that's for the level 2 and level 3 tier of the pollinator scorecard, where you have a score that comes out of it. So you'll have a sense of what that score is going to look like. Then with ArcGIS Pro, again, this is desktop software. So this is a full GIS software that Esri provides. It's sort of their main GIS software. And you can get that free, either if your organization already has ArcGIS Online accounts, they may or may not include ArcGIS Pro. So you need to either try it out or check with your IT folks. If you don't have that, though, we provide free accounts through UIC, and so they can provide you with that ArcGIS Online account. And all of those accounts, I think even the Fieldworker account, includes ArcGIS Pro, so that can be accessed. And there's details in the manual as to how to download that and get that installed. There are all these custom tools that are available, mainly focusing on sort of cleaning up what GIS data you have and getting it into the format that'll work in the database system. And then there's customized tools for both doing that cleanup and import process. And then after you have the data in there, you can use it for your CCAA reporting. You can, and all these are, again, these custom tools that have been developed. And you can also create programs and assign different features to those programs. And you can have lots of programs or just one program, whatever makes most sense for you. Data management and manipulation. So again, it's a full GIS. You have full access to all of your GIS data and can go in there and make any edits that are necessary to your data, working directly with the database. And this is also where you can go in and modify your sharing settings. So initially, when you do the intake questionnaire, you'll say what data you want to share with other organizations, but that can be modified in ArcGIS Pro. And actually, even some of that can be done in ArcGIS Online. Okay, moving to the ArcGIS Online column. So again, this is all web-based. So this is where you're going to have access to the those dashboards that we mentioned. This is really where management folks can come and quickly see what data you have in your system. And it has some editing capability through that data manager tool. So you can go in and, well, first I should say on the private dashboard, you can see if there are some errors in the data set. And then in the data manager tool, you can go in and actually make some of those edits within that interface as well. So you may want your GIS folks also to be working through ArcGIS Online in addition to Pro, but they can do that in both places. And then let's see, web mapping application to clean and validate data. Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. So yeah, with that, I think I'll turn it back over to you, Caroline, and maybe we'll jump into discussion soon.
Yeah, yep. Thank you, Mark. That was perfect.